to recite all of the learning sponsorships each morning. Okay. Today in particular, we want to acknowledge the passing and the tribute to Saratova Bat Yisrael Dov. Okay. Okay, and also wish refuah shlema to our Chaver Zev Kipperman, who was in the hospital.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So for refuah shlema, so in the Zechus of Saratova Bas Yisrael Dov, we are learning, and for refuah shlema for him, as well as we now continue with our recitation, so to speak, of the learning sponsors. A year of learning by Sue and Arnie Gerlich in memory of Malka Perlman and Philip Mann, and Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Yosef Meir ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, and Yerivka Pearl Rosna bas Arav Tzvi Hirsch, in the memory of family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Cheryl share her children and grandchildren in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Arav Akiva. Marcia Federbush and family in memory of her husband, Dr. Oriel Paul Federbush, Oriel Pinchas ben Arav Shimon. Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edelbas Yaakov. Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, and Martha Gitler, Charna Bas Yeshaya. Friends of Toby Paris, Saratova Bat Yisrael Dov. Friends of Malka Levy, Malka Bat Yosef. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine, in memory of Ramona Levine. Rachel Mata Bas Asher. We have a month of learning by Perry and Jill Meltzer, in memory of his father, David ben Fishel Halevi, and her mother, Bela Bas Avram. By Dov Bodlander, in memory of his wife, Udal Bas Yehuda Tzvi. By Mordechai and Miriam Burr, in memory of what? Yeah, that's listed under a month, right? But the donation was for a month, right? Okay, starting tomorrow. Okay, all right. Also today, a week by Jack Gilman in memory of his mother, Elka Bas Yeshayahu. Okay, okay, so that, and today's the 9th, a day of learning sponsored by Marla and Marty Teichman in memory of their son, Yosef Yonah ben Avraham Menachem Mendel. Okay, also today, Judy and Michael Poretsky, a day of learning in memory of her sister, Gutta Esther Bas Yaakov Yitzchak. Starting tomorrow, a month of learning by Mordechai and Miriam Burr in memory of his father, Yaakov ben Mordechai. Also starting tomorrow, a month of learning by the friends from Yarmouth E in commemoration of the Shloshim for Miriam and Mildred Schiffer's son, Zev David ben Shimon Halevi. And that is it. May the Shamas have an aliyah, crank Rafir Velti Yeshir Hashem Atzliah, and the whole B'nai Yisrael a good Gebench.
Amen.
Okay, got it. Okay, so as we start Gemara Sukkah today, may be privileged to finish this and many other Masechtot together as well.
Amen.
I gave just a general guideline of what how I see us working the daf, and for some of us, it may be the first time we're learning Gemara in the terms of the daf situation. For others, it's been multiple times. So that's why we say we appreciate those who feel they can contribute. Okay, I want to start off with a very, very quick introduction to the to the Masechet by saying, what's the pasuk? That's the essential pasuk that we need to keep in mind. Whether you're using the art scroll, you see it in its introduction, okay, or you see it in the Koran as well. It basically says, Basukot teshvu shivat yamim, kol ezrach v'Yisrael yeshvu basukot. Laman yedu dorotechem, ki basukot hashavti et b'nei Yisrael, v'hotzi otam me'eretz Mitzrayim, ani Hashem Elokeichem. In the English, in sukkahs, you shall dwell for a 7-day period. Every citizen of Israel shall dwell in a sukkah, so that your generations will know that I caused the children of Israel to dwell in sukkahs when I took them out of the land of Egypt. I am Hashem, your God. Based on that pasuk, would we know what a sukkah is? Would we know what size it should be? Would we know what dimensions it should be? Would we know how to build it? Would we know what it's supposed to contain? Okay, none of that is given there in that pasuk, nor in rest of the Torah. And so, two questions that we're going to need to address as we start the Gemara is, where do we get that information? Okay, we're going to see there are various suggestions that are presented in terms of what psukim might give us a basis for determining to answer some of those questions. Okay. The second item is we're going to say, if that's the case, right, that if it's not clearly spelled out Doraita, okay, then it's a question basically beyond that, okay, of how do we determine some of these things? Why does one person say it's one pasuk, somebody else says it's based on another pasuk? Okay, why is it that the Mishnah then has to give certain structural configurations? Okay, and how does the Gemara respond to that? So that's a quick introduction as we start Gemara Sukkah Amud Beis. Okay, Sukkah Shahaya Gvoa Lamala Me'esrim Ama Psula, says the Gemara. The sukkah that is higher, I'm going to say, then 20 amma. How much is an amma? Okay, approximately. Okay, right? Do you want to say 18 inches? I like to say from the tip of a middle finger to the elbow. Okay, which means that's an approximate figure, and it may differ then, right? Because Mel's amma may be different than, since he's a taller, larger gentleman, than let's say this young man over here. Okay, all right. That's in any case, that's the point. It cannot be higher than 20 amma. Where is the Gemara? Where is that basis? How do we know that? Okay, we're going to see. The Rabbi Yehuda machshir, and Rabbi Yehuda agrees that it's acceptable. V'she'ena gvoa asarat tfachim, but it, right? But then says the Gemara, what happens there? What are we saying in terms of that that height? Right? Rabbi Yehuda says it is valid if it's taller than that. V'she'ena gvoa asarat tfachim. Okay. But what's the minimum height? Right? It's got to be at least 10 tfachim. Okay. Says the Mishnah. V'she'en la shlosha tevhanot. Okay, and what happens if it doesn't have 3 walls? V'she'chamata miroba mitzelta. And what happens then if the issue is that it needs to have more shade than sun? And if the sun is greater than the shade, then in all of these situations, if it's a question of height, question of walls, question of more shade than sun, if it doesn't fulfill these requirements, says Tanakama in the Mishnah, it is psulam. It is not a valid sukkah. Okay, so we have 3 criteria. Okay, what's going to be the most important one? Is the one of more shade than sun the most important? We're going to have to see. Gemara is continuing. It's not. We have another Mishnah that says Hatam. It's elsewhere. Mabui shahu gavoa me esrim amar yima'et. We have in the Gemara Shabbos, where some of us have learned together, the fact, right, that if we have a area that's a alleyway, and we want to build a tsuras hapetach, a kind of item on top, a marker, right? That on top that tells us the transition from private domain to public domain. Okay, and we put this bar, this piece of wood wherever up there. Okay, and we do that. All right. But it says if it's more than 20 amma, it has to be lowered. Okay. Now, it may be that we're trying to derive a parallel from that example to this example to give us the 20 height issue. Okay. What happens? Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Eino Tzarich. Rabbi Yehuda says that's not necessary to reduce the height of that piece of wood. Okay. Okay. So another question. Ma'ishna gabe sukkah detani psula. What is the difference, asks the Gemara, that whereas in regards to a sukkah, we've said that it's if it's higher than 20, it's invalid. Umayishna gabe mabui detani tekanta. And what's the difference then in regard to this example of a passageway, an alleyway, and we put this block of wood, okay, there, and there it says it gives us a remedy how to make it still viable. How come we can't do the same thing with regards to the issue of a sukkah? Well, let's see, right? Sukkah de oraita tani psula. First answer that the Gemara tries to give. Sukkah, where that's a commandment of the Torah. Here we're teaching that if it's higher than that, it's invalid. Mabui de Rabbanan, a transition from the alley into the public domain, where we put some sort of a board or this or that up there. Okay. All right. We say that, different. That's the benefit. Okay. Tani Takanta. There we're teaching that there is a remedy. Okay. Now, v'ibayit ema. We're getting a little feedback.
Sorry.
Okay.
I didn't know that you had it on your phone.
Okay. Yeah, I might say the following. Right. Let's go on. Bid the all right. When it comes to the Torah, nami tani takanta. Maybe there too I can teach a remedy. Mihu sukkah, the nafishe milta, psik, okay, batani psula. Whereas in regards to, even if I could say a remedy is viable, okay, for the sukkah, I might say that because there are so many other things, so many other mitzvot that are identified with sukkah, not just being in the facility, so to speak, but what about lulav and esrog? What about other kinds of things? Okay, that therefore, at that point, what we're going to,
With regard to fixing the sukkah,
yeah,
there are many components. There's height, there's number of walls, is it kosher stuff?
okay.
So if you lower the roof,
Then,
wall
right.
would create.
Well, not just,
It gets
right.
complicated.
Right, that's true. You also have the point that we said that the Mishnah set up 3 criteria. So simply by changing the height doesn't help because you still have to deal with the other 2 aspects, which we said was question of shade, question of walls.
They all exist.
Okay, right. So that could be another way. Thank you, Michael, for sharing. Okay, psiki, we'd start Vatani psula, and that's why we're suggesting maybe it teaches it. Okay, that way. Okay, mabui de lo nafish mile. Okay, whereas with regards to the alleyway, Okay, right? Putting up a board, right? We say that maybe there aren't as many issues involved with that. Tani Takanta. And therefore it teaches a remedy. Minahani Mili, how do we know this? On what basis? Amar Rabba Amar Kra. So here we're going to see the Gemara continues and is now going to suggest various Chachamim who are going to suggest various psukim that they're going to say, well, from this pasuk, I can learn this material. Okay? And here's Rabba with the first suggestion. It says the pasuk, Raman Yedu Dorotechem, Ki Besukot Hoshavti et Bnei Yisrael. Okay? In other words, so that your generations will know that I caused the children of Israel to dwell in a sukkah. Okay? What happens? Ad Esrim Amma. Okay, until 20 Amma, Adam Yodea Shehudar B'Sukkah. The person knows that they are dwelling in the sukkah. Lamala Me'asrim Amma. But if the height of the sukkah is more than 20 Amma, Ein Adam Yodea Shadar B'Sukkah. A person does not know that he's dwelling there in the sukkah. Right? Why? Midashum delo shalta be'ena. Why? Because his eyes don't necessarily look up. Okay? He doesn't focus, he doesn't see. Okay? What's around him, it's too high normally for him to be aware. Okay? That's the possible argument that Rava uses. Okay? Now, somebody else, one of the sages, is going to give a different, an alternative pasuk and give an alternative basis as to why this issue of 20 Amma may be the criteria. Okay, Rabbi Zera Amma, Mehacha from here, from this pasuk, V'sukati Letzel Yomam Mechored. Right? Namely, he's going to give an answer, and the sukkah will be for shade in the daytime from the heat. Okay, namely, Ad Esrim Amma, up to 20 Amma, Adam Yoshev B'Tseil Sukkah. One can sit then in the shadow of the sukkah. Okay, so notice he's giving a different criteria. He's applying it to the shade issue, the skach issue. Okay, Lamala me esrim amma. If the ceiling of the sukkah is higher than 20 amma, ein adam yoshev b'tseil sukkah ela b'tseil dafnot. But if otherwise, he would be sitting in the shade of the walls rather than the shade of the ceiling, of the skach, of the growth that's on top there. That's his example. So we have two different examples. One was Rava, who based it on simply the issue of the criteria of the height. Now we have Rabbi Zera, who's basing it on the situation of more shade than sun. Okay. Amarle Abai. And now Abai is going to respond, right?
Which one? First and second.
Okay. What happens here is we're going to see actually Rabbi Zera is going to respond ultimately to Abai. Okay. Ela me'ata ha'oseh sukato bashtarot karnai. Okay. If we're going to use that criteria of the shade, what about the fact of those people who live in the town of Ashtarot Karnaim, which happens to be in a valley, and therefore, because it's in a valley, you have two mountains on either side, and maybe they're not going to get any sun whatsoever, right? Okay, unless theoretically, unless it were to be directly over, right? So, right? So Ella, right? So I said Ella me'ata hoseh sukato bashtarot kanim. Hachinami delo have sukkah. Are we going to say therefore that they should not have a sukkah under those circumstances? Because we can't, because that eliminates one of the three criteria. L'chatchila, absolutely. Amarle. Okay. So he comes back to him. Hatam dal ashtarot karnei. remove the the issue of that town. That's out of the ordinary, all right? So what happens? So he goes on and tells him as follows, Ika Tseil Sukkah, okay? There still could be the shade of the top of the sukkah, the ceiling of the sukkah, the schach, okay? So why are we saying hacha, okay? And he says here to him, okay, again, okay, when we're talking about his sukkah, right, in this case, dal daf note, okay, leket sale, okay. Here in sukkah, if we're not talking about the walls, okay, then we don't have shade. Late, right, sukkah, leket sale, sukkah. We wouldn't have the, right?
Noon they'll still be shade.
Well, that's the question. Okay.
If it's higher, if it's Gabal in the Esrim, then you take away the walls, you're not
You
gonna
have shade, right? That's Varava Amar, says Rava. So Rava now continues. Mehacha. Okay, all right. So how about from this pasuk? Rava comes back and gives us an alternative now. Besukot teshvu shivat yamin. So sit in the sukkah, it says 7 days, right? Amra Torah, says the Torah. Kol shivat yamin, say midirat keva, v'shei b'dirat ara'i. Leave a permanent residence and establish yourself in a temporary residence. Okay? Ad esrim amma, up to 20 amma. Adam osed dirato dirat ar'i. A person up to 20 amma, a person would consider it a temporary residence. Okay? Lamala me esrim amma, higher than 20 amma. Ein adam osed dirato dirat ar'i ela dirat keva. Okay, higher than that, a person doesn't consider it simply a temporary, but it's more permanent.
In terms of construction, that's the time frame. If it was a very tall structure, you have to build very
Sturdy,
sturdy
right,
foundations.
stronger,
walls.
right.
A dira sarai would be a flimsy
Right.
structure, so they're just talking about engineering.
Could be, all right. Amarle Abai, Elame Ata. So Abai now says, but what about from up here, the following? Asam Mechitzot Shel Barzel. So if we're dealing with the question of how strong the structure is going to be as the criteria, Abai is saying, well, fine, instead of using wood, I'll make metal walls. Okay, do it that way. All right, I'll make the walls, the separations of metal, v'sichach al gaban, and I will put some sort of vegetative covering as a ceiling on top of those. Hachanami delohavi sukkah. Here too. Then are we going to say then that that's not a valid sukkah? So Amarle. So now he comes back to him once more and says as follows, Abaye, okay? Right? Hachi ka'aminalach. This is what I mean to tell you. Ad esrim ama the adam osed dirato dirat ari. Up to 20 ama, a person makes his residence a temporary residence. Throws something together, he's out in the field, he wants protection from the sun while he's doing the harvest. That's one thing, right? Ki avid le dirat keva, right? But when he does a more permanent kind of residence, right? Nami nafik lamala me asara ama. He also is yotze. He fulfills that requirement, okay, of something being higher than 20 amma. The Adamo said dirato dirat keva. That's how a person makes his residence more permanent. Ki avid le dirat ari. Okay, because when he makes it only a temporary residence, nami lo nafek, okay, he does not fulfill then his obligation. As we go to the next right? Now, so the Gemara now is going to raise an interesting question. Okay, we have seen so far a few suggestions. Rava gave two suggestions, okay, of psukim by which he derives some sort of basis to say, right, that 20 amma is the limit, the rationale why it's found in the Mishnah. We also saw that, I believe it was Rabbi Zera, who gave a different explanation, a different pasuk, but he also connected it with a different criteria. Okay? And so the Gemara is going to continue to explore this issue in another way. Okay? Kulhu karaba lo amra. Okay? All the others didn't say an answer like Rabba did. Hahu yediyah l'dorot. Why? Okay? Because we could say then that based on the pasuk that he gave, all right, that may have been an answer to explain what was important for people to remember and know about the exodus from Egypt for generations. It doesn't necessarily spell out the requirement of the 20 amma that's basis in the Mishnah. Okay, that's the issue. They argue. Hahu yidiyah l'dorot. Okay, Karabi Zera. And as far as the answer that Rabbi Zera gave, right? Nami lo amre. Okay, others didn't give that answer. Why? Hahu liyamota Mashiachu dichti. Why? Because we might argue that Rabbi Zera's answer is only good in terms of defining things for when the Messianic era comes. Okay, that okay, that we wouldn't use the kind of sukkah that we have today. It would be a whole different kind of facility. Okay,
It's metaphorical, it's talking about Amos.
right, right. And so we maybe wouldn't even require a sukkah in Yemot HaMashiach, right? So that's why maybe they didn't use Rabbi Zera's pasuk, the Rabbi Zera. Okay, and as far as Rabbi Zera goes, right, in Cain lema kra. So perhaps maybe he could have used a different pasuk, a different verse to give his explanation, namely v'chupat tiyeh l'tzel yomam. Okay, namely that, and it will be a covering for shade in the daytime. Use that if his important criteria was the issue of shade, as opposed to the issue of the height. All right. Umay v'sukat tiyeh l'tzel yomam. So what then is the meaning of this particular phrase? And it will be a covering for shade in the daytime. Okay, what's its importance and significance? Shemat minei tarte. We can learn from this two things, right? What two things? One would be, okay, that the lesser item would clearly be that the requirement of roofing is to provide shade. But another element would be to say that Hashem is a kind of canopy of glory, okay, for the nation, okay, that he protects them, okay. So, Kiraba, Nami lo Amri, but they also didn't say or use the pasuk that Rabbi said, Mishum Kushya da Abaye. Why didn't they use? Because of Abaye's questioning that verse. Okay, the question that he raised earlier, right, when he challenged Rab, that possible explanation. So the Gemara goes on now in a slightly new question point. Kiman azlaha the Amar Rabbi Yoshia, Amar Rab. Okay, according to whom, asks the Gemara, right? Do we see that Rabbi Yoshia says in the name of Rab, Machloket b'she'ein dafnot magiot l'skach. Okay, this whole argument of the height issue, okay, of why does it have to be no more than 20, really depends upon a situation we're suggesting where the walls don't reach up to that ceiling, to that covering. Okay? That's what their argument is about. Aval dafnot magiot l'schach. Okay, but where the walls of the sukkah do reach up to the top, okay, to the covering, right? Afilu lemala me'esrim amak she'ra. Then I would argue that if it's even higher than 20 amma, then that sukkah should be kosher, right? Kiman, according to whom? Kirabba, according to the review of Rabbah. The Amar, Mishum Delo Shalta Ba'ena. Okay? Why is there a question there? Because Rabbah said people's eyes don't normally look up that high. Okay? Now, we could understand that, particularly if we made the comparison earlier to the beam that was put on the Mabui. People walking down a long alleyway, okay, may be looking straight forward, but they may also be far enough away that they would see that there's an end to the alleyway and that there's something above there, okay? And so therefore, if they can't, if it's too high for them to see, lower that beam, make it a more accessible to vision. Okay? But that isn't the case here. So that's why we come back to that earlier discussion in the Gemara. Okay? Now, the Kevan de Dapnot Magiot, and since we say that the walls reach up, right? What do we say then? Mishalet Shalta Ba'ena. Okay? In that case, people will notice. They will see. Okay? Be able to see that where the ceiling is. Now, Gemara picks up again another item. Azlaha the Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Okay, in this case, we can see here that we'll right, that we can see again. I'm sorry, Kiman Azlaha the Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Okay, according to whom then do we say that this discussion that we've seen so far, okay, is similar to that Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, namely, machloket b'she'ein ba ela arba amot al arba amot. Maybe their argument reflects not so much the issue of the maximum height of the schach, but maybe we're talking about the minimum height of the sukkah. Okay, all right, the minimum size of the sukkah. Okay, in other words, fine, you've talked about the height, but what about the other dimensions? Okay, doesn't it have to be 4 amma by 4 amma? Aval yesh ba yoter me arba amot al arba amot afilu lamala me asrim amma kshera. That maybe if even it could be more than 20 amma high, but so long as the, let's say, the other dimensions, okay, are more by 4 amma by 4 amma. Okay, right, well, that may be, okay. So that the question is, maybe then we would say that, you know, that kind of sukkah would be acceptable. So Gemara comes on. Kiman, according to whom would that be? Rabbi Zera. That might be satisfied with Rabbi Zera's pasuk and his explanation. The Amar, as he said, Mishum Tseilhu, right? That it's based on the issue of the criteria of the shade. But Kevan de Revacha, since it's more spacious, Ikat Seil Sukkah. And therefore I would have the shade from the roof, the ceiling, the top of the sukkah. So the Gemara now goes and asks another issue. Okay, Keman Azlaha da Amar Rav Chanan bar Rava Amar Rav. According to whom then do we say that whose view okay, rationale explanation, depending on how we want to phrase it, do we say and understand what Rav Chanan Bar Rabba said in the name of Rav? Namely, in this case, he says, jesting, machloket b'she'ena mechazeket ela kadei rosho v'rubo v'shulchano. That maybe we're saying that their concern is the fact that the size of this sukkah is only large enough, right, to accommodate part of the person, namely his head and his, let's say, upper body, okay, and a table, right? Aval mechazeket yoter mikdei rosho v'rubo v'shulchano. But if this sukkah can retain, in other words, enough of the person, that his whole body and the table can fit inside, right? Afilu lamala me'asrim amma kshera. Then even if it's more than 20 amos high, it's acceptable. It's valid. Come on, according to whom? And the Gemara answers, Delo kechad. It's not according to any one of them. Not the pasuk that Rabbah mentioned, not the pasuk that Rava mentioned, not the pasuk that Rabbi Zera mentioned. Okay? So the Gemara comes back now and gives us another statement. Bishlema de Rabbi Yoshia, Pliga ad Rav Huna. That's understandable. If we say in a case that Rabbi Yoshia had an argument, right, with Rav Huna and Rav Nachman bar Rabba, the inhu kayahave shiura b'machsha, okay, that they were talking about the question of the measurement of the extent of the length of the sukkah. V'ihu lo kayahiv shiura b'mashka, and he wasn't talking about the extent, the length of the sukkah. Ela Rav Huna v'Rav Chanan bar Rabba nema behechsher sukkah k'miflegei. But we might say that Rav Huna and Rav Chanan bar Rabba were arguing in terms of the validity of the sukkah. That's what they argued about. Namely, the Mar Savar Hechsher Sukkah Ba'arba Amot, that one master felt that the validity of the sukkah was based on the fact that it had to have the basic, let's say, length and width directions, okay, of at least 4 amos. Umar Savar Hechsher Sukkah B'machazeket Rosho V'rubo V'shulchano. And perhaps the other said, no, so long as it can accommodate the head and upper body and a table for a person, okay, could put in a snack table, let's say, and just lean over inside, okay, that would be sufficient, okay? Lo, says the Gemara, that's not the case. The Kuli Alma Hechsher Sukkah Rosho V'rubo V'shulchano. No, everybody is in agreement that really that the minimum, okay, size of the interior of the sukkah has to be such that it can include a person's head, upper body, and a table. Okay, that's clear. Well, isn't that one of the requirements, right? Okay. Vahacha baha kamiflage. And here, this is what they're arguing about. Demar savar b'mechazeket rosho v'rubo v'shulchano pligi. That one master holds that they're arguing about whether it can accommodate the head and most of the upper body and the table. That's what they're arguing about. Aval yoter me rosho v'rubo v'shulchano divrei hakol kshera. But if it can accommodate more than those items, then it's a valid sukkah. Umar savar mi rosho v'rubo v'shulchano. And the other master holds in regarding his head and most of his upper body and his table, ad arba amot plige. Okay, that even if it could include that much of his body, it still needed to have minimum length and width of 4 amos. Okay, aval yoter mi-4 amot. But if the sukkah dimensions, length, and width is more than 4 amos, divrei hakol kshera, then everybody would say it's acceptable. Okay, now, however, Gemara is going to bring another item. Okay, another qualification, another discussion, another presentation. How does it do so? It brings a braita. Remember, braitot were those statements that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi did not include in the Mishnah. Okay, braita also it's a separate sefer, a separate book. I think if I remember, Rabbi Yossi was one of the, right? Okay, so they cite this braita. Sukkah shehi gavoa lamala me'esrim ama psula. Clear statement that if its roof is higher than 20 amma, it's invalid. V'Rebbe Yehuda machshir ad 40 amma. And Rabbi Yehuda would say it is acceptable up to 40 or 50 amma. Now that's going to be a pretty tall facility. Okay? Amar Rabbi Yehuda. I'll give you an example, says Rabbi Yehuda. Ma'aseh behileni hamalka. There was an incident with the famous Queen Helena of Adiabene, okay, who was a convert to Judaism. Okay, she happened to have been observant, okay, in that she not only gave offerings to the temple, okay, but other things. And she built a sukkah, right? Belud, in the town of Lud, which was an ancient location, right? Many of us know that the Rabbi Akiva, I believe, or Rabbi Tarfon, I think, was the Rav of Lud, okay? Shahaita sukkata gavoa me'esrim amma, that she had a sukkah that was ceiling was higher than 20 amma. V'hayuz kenim nichnasim v'yotzim l'sham, and the sages would go in and out, would use this sukkah. V'lo amru la davar, and they never complained, right? They never challenged. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, if the sages never challenged that particular sukkah, it must be valid, right? What? Oh, well, that's going to be the question. That's going to be the question. You jumped ahead a little bit, but okay. Is a woman obligated to sit and eat in the sukkah? Why might we think that's not the case? It's a time-bound mitzvah. Okay? So she might be patur, she might be exempt, right? So that may be the question that the Gemara is going to come. Misham Raya, asks the Gemara, you're going to use that as a source, as a proof text? Okay? Isha haita uptura min sukkah. She is a woman, and because it was a time-bound mitzvah that women are not generally required to observe, she's exempt from sitting in the sukkah. So what if her sukkah is more than 20 amos high? How can you use that as a proof?
20 amos was based on something that 45 was not. What did Rabbi Yehuda base it on?
Well, let's see.
20 amos because that was the site that usually.
Well, we're suggesting that it may have been based on the parallel with the Korah in the Mabul. That's what they
Also,
begin.
the eyesight,
That's
level
what
of the
I
eyesight,
right.
so that's why the Torah is that way. too.
That's exactly.
According to 45.
Well, who knows? Let's see. 40 or 50, right? V'halo shiv'a banim havula. But she had 7 sons. Certainly, at least for her sons, she would make a kosher sukkah, right? Va'od, and furthermore, says the Gemara, right? Kol ma'aseha lo asta ela al pi chachamim. Okay, that she always followed the direction of the sages, right? Lama li lamitne. Okay, so the Gemara now gets a little tangent. Okay, why did we have to teach this additional phrase? Okay, o va'od kol ma'aseh lo asta ela al pi hachachamim. Why did we have to include that in the Braita? All right, hachi ka'amar lahom. This is what it means to tell us or to tell him. Ki tamru banim ktanim havu. When you said she had sons, okay, maybe it was an issue that she had sons that were minors and they were below bar mitzvah age, and therefore, didn't have to worry about that situation. Okay, uktanim puturim min sukkah, and minors are exempt from the sukkah. Kevan de shiva havi, but since she had 7, efshar de lo havi baho chad she'enot tzarich le'imo. All right. Certainly, she had to have at least 1 out of the 7 that had to have been above that age. Okay, that some of them, we said a child that's that young that needs to have close association with your mother. Okay, so that child you wouldn't require an obligation to serve.
Why is
Okay.
it possible to have?
All right. Okay. Well, that's what we're going to get to. Exactly.
But the rest.
Okay.
are
All right.
beyond-
So fine. You want to say that one is a small child. Okay. He doesn't have the obligation.
But once you get to be about.
Okay.
4,
But that's where we're headed. Exactly. That's where we're headed. But aren't we going to say that even a small child needs to be educated, needs to be taught? Well,
8 or 9.
let's see. Okay, so let's see. Right, let's see.
It could be an Eloy, so that's not.
Okay, v'chi timru katan she'enot tzarich limo, right? Midrabanan hu demechaye. And even if you say he's a minor, might we say that he's obligated from a rabbinic point of view? V'ihi b'derabanan lo mishkacher. All right, but you're saying then that she doesn't observe. She isn't concerned about what the rabbis say. Tashma. Listen then to the following. Braita. Va'od kol ma'aseh lo asta ela al pi chachamim. When another Braita is telling us, when that earlier Braita said that she furthermore only followed the direction of the rabbis. Tashma, right? When it said that, Ve'od lo ma'aseh lo asta ela chachamim, bishleim elaman damar, bishleim elaman damar b'she'en dafnot magiot l'schach. That's a situation we're talking about if the walls don't reach all the way to the ceiling, to the growth, right, to the vegetative covering. Machloket, that's an argument. Darka shel malka le'shei b'sukkah she'en dafnot magiot l'schach. Okay, that's a situation, okay, that a queen may sit in a sukkah where the walls don't reach up to the sky. Okay, why? As we just go over a tiny, tiny bit, mishum avira. Why? Because she wants the air.
She's got a
Wants-
lot of guests coming in and out.
Who
She needs
are they?
ventilation.
Elalaman da amar besuka katana machloket. But according to the one who says in a small sukkah there's an argument, mechidarka shel malka le'shei besuka katana. Is it normally then the status of a queen to sit in such a small sukkah? Normally not. And so we're going to stop right there for today. Okay, and pick up. Okay,
How's the dog tomorrow?
now we have Rabbi Hanani ben Amar.